Affordable loss teaches you to bring the downside into your control.
Affordable loss is the idea that you only invest in your venture what you can afford to lose.
Affordable loss has this really beautiful thing of, well, I don't know how much I should invest. I only know how much I can spend without hurting myself.
You're focusing on the downside risk, not the upside opportunity.
Never bet the farm. So you always want to make sure that in the event you're wrong, because you probably are, you don't want to have overbet on the first idea. So you're constantly maintaining flexibility by protecting whatever some of those critical resources are.
Whether you're building it causally or whether you're building it effectually, you have come up with this idea, and the idea is this pen. And you would like to build a very successful venture that makes and markets this pen to everyone on earth. When you're building the venture causally, the way you think about it is to say, how do I manufacture this pen?
Yeah, the alternative to affordable loss, right, is trying to figure out, well, if the market's this big, and here's what it's going to cost in resources to deliver that, I guess I need to go raise, X amount of dollars.
Who is going to actually draw the engineering specs for this pen? Who is going to manufacture it?
Right, you're spending your time trying to collect means, going back to the bird in hand principles.
You start thinking about every potential stakeholder that you require in building the entire supply chain and building out the business model for your venture.
But to raise that much money, I'm going to need to persuade an investor or somebody to give me those resources, and here's what that takes. And
here is why you, Mr. or Miss Investor, should actually give me the money so that I can hire the suppliers, I can actually hire the employees, and I can actually go talk to the customers.
So to them, the logic is, expected return, invest into the things that you actually planned to invest in, because that's where you promised that the value would come from.
So the affordable loss principle allows you to act consistent with the other principles and maintain flexibility.
How would you actually explain working by a principle such as affordable loss to, for example, a bank or the venture capitalist that gives you money? And of course, the answer is you probably wouldn't, shouldn't, or couldn't, because that's totally against their logic, right?
As soon as you start making big bets, where if you're wrong, you'll die, now you can't make lemonade out of lemons.
Effectuation encourages you to use affordable loss, to fail cheap, to fail within your own bounds, and to survive from small failures so you can learn from them to go on to fight another day with the benefit of that learning.
So how do you calculate your affordable loss?
So in affordable loss, now the resources come in, right? So the resources in the sense of the consumable things. So people would very quickly think of money, right? So you would think of an investment of money that you put into a process.
Well, if I do this, I might lose, pick your number.
I may not be entirely happy that I lost it, but it also isn't a fatal activity or fatal incident if it happens that way.
Another resource that I would also think about in terms of affordable loss is, of course, time.
So you can invest multiple amounts or different amounts of time into the process, and they could be, lost or in vain in some ways.
I'm a father. I have two kids. So for me, time is extremely important, much more than money.
It could also incorporate material that you have, that you invest, it's gone, and then you want to have abided by the rule of affordable loss.
Reputation is a resource in which you should think about affordable loss too.
That's particularly important for corporate contexts. You may think of reputation, right? So you're on a career path, and you may want to think about into how many innovation projects you step in, do stuff, are visible with it.
It's not about money at this point, it's about your reputation.
That's the idea of different kinds of resources that can come under the rule of affordable loss.
People sometimes ask me, why do you call it the affordable loss principle? Why not we call it something like an affordable investment? And the way I think about it is that there is something very important in entrepreneurship in connection with the downside. The idea that we actually understand that failures and the downside and losses are all part of the process of co-creating futures.
So of course, one question in affordable loss is how often do I go back and try again?
In psychology, people have studied this bias that human beings have called escalation of commitment. So if I say, I'm going to give it 6 months of nights and weekends and $20,000, and I chug along and start building the venture, at the end of the 6 months, it looks like if I put in another $20,000 and if I put in another 6 months, it would work out. And it's very tempting to actually keep adding to your affordable loss, even though you're getting to a point where you cannot actually afford to lose the investments that you're making, whether in terms of time or money or emotion or any other resources.
I think the idea of the brash entrepreneur who's willing to expend everything on their personal credit cards and go after opportunities and just that what you read in the media it might have happened every once in a while, but so does like Michael Jordan and LeBron James. The rest of us have to think of a way to actually go about starting ventures, which are important to us because we are trying to change the world or we have a passion for something, but do it in a way which is risk mitigating, not risk attractive. And that's what the affordable loss principle allows you to do.
Yeah, so with affordable loss, you're basically self-constraining yourselves in a way. You're telling yourself that this is the amount of stuff, of resources that I would want to invest to try out. And then I will see where it led me.
So having fewer resources and investing no more than what you can afford to lose also introduces creativity into the process. So between the crazy quilt and the affordable loss, the probability that you will come up with something new keeps increasing, assuming, of course, failure doesn't occur along the way.
When you put that kind of walk away there, you figure out, also, do I really want to do this or not? Is it worth this to me?
And if failure occurs along the way, you have to recalculate your affordable loss, recalculate your bird in hand, and you have to continue the crazy quilt process.
Once you have a really detailed vision of what your affordable loss is, that helps you articulate that so you don't go beyond and get ego and pride and some other very human psychological factors in the way of making good decisions for yourself.
And so I always tell students to think about the affordable loss as a commitment that you make, that at that point you're not going to go beyond it on your own, that you're going to bring in your closest family, your well-wishers, your stakeholders, people who will give you straight talk so that you actually do revisit the decision. Can you still afford to lose what you've already lost, or can you afford to lose more?
So the way I think about it, so if you take the principle of affordable loss and if you take the principle of crazy quilt, what you're trying to do from a means perspective is to stitch together different types of affordable loss from different people together so that you have collected the means to achieve something. Right?
It's a network of means and affordable losses where everybody is committing what they think they can afford to lose as well.
As an early entrepreneur especially, you only need a little bit of everything.
As a venture grows or as you add more people to that venture, the affordable loss morphs.
As people gather these resources and as more people are working with you, it is very tempting to say, now I have very large affordable loss levels. Oh, I can afford to place that bet. I can afford to buy this company, or I can just go and hire that ace technologist who costs a lot of money. And my advice to you would be resist.
A lot of people, in considering affordable loss, completely ignore the affordability or non-affordability of not starting.
So one way to think about starting a venture or not starting a venture is to calculate the opportunity cost of starting a venture.
We wrote a paper on what we call the plunge decision. Like, why does somebody start a company? And affordable loss is a big part of that. When it's a big question mark, I'm hesitant to act. But when I can constrain it into, well, here's what I can afford to lose, now it's more straightforward for me to act. And what oftentimes comes up is a question that entrepreneurs sometimes fail to ask, which is, well, what happens if you don't start it?
But expert entrepreneurs bring a slightly different view of opportunity cost to the table. And they say, you know what, I have always wanted to be my own boss, or I have always wanted to start this venture. I have wanted to spend some time solving this problem. And I want to think about the opportunity cost of not doing that.
If I don't start this now, well, when will I? And will I be satisfied if I never try it?
You might make nothing, you might make $1 billion. So there's absolutely no way to calculate the opportunity cost of not starting the venture.
And so affordable loss allows you to act and get you to that place where you can now safely ask that question, like, not only can I afford to lose this, but what if I don't do it now? When am I gonna do it?
And when you ask that question, what is the opportunity cost of not starting a venture, you start realizing what you are willing to lose in order to start for it. So it naturally turns your attention to the downside, and it says, here is what it is worth to me to start a venture.
Most of us don't regret that many things we did, but we definitely will regret things we didn't do. Entrepreneurs commonly have that feeling like, well, if I don't start this now, when am I gonna? And affordable loss facilitates that question better, I think.
It encourages you not to fail fabulously. If you come into a venture and you say, I have 6 months to spend, and at the time 6 months are done, I'm going to have to make a decision, you control what that failure looks like.
If you think effectually about it, you do not have to think about any particular goal as achieved or not achieved. And you do not have to think about any particular resources as the end of your game. Because you need to be using resources, things within your control, to increase what is within your control by bringing in other people. And so if you get to a halting point in affordable loss, all that it is telling me is that you haven't brought on enough stakeholders. You haven't paid enough attention to the crazy quill principle and to the pilot in the plane principle, and that you kind of gotten stuck into a causal approach to bird in hand and affordable loss.
The only decision that you have to make is, what can I actually put into the process that when it's lost, it doesn't really bother me.
So affordable loss is not something you do only at the beginning of venturing. It is also something that can become a creative aspect of building your venture and the way you create and manage resources. But it is also something that is an aspect of entrepreneurial psychology that you need to master going forward.